This is Bob Ferguson, and I have my friend Kellen Gracie with me. And we're going to be going over some pretty interesting numbers that Kellen has developed. Kellen is a senior data scientist with a venture forward project at GoDaddy. He's also a partner in Rivada, which does strategic IT consulting. We are working on our top 7 survey for Intelligent Cities Forum. Kellen said, I've got some really amazing data on economic development and particularly microbusiness in Fairfield. And one of the key tenets of ICF is broadband promotes the capacity for people to do business, particularly in remote areas, in rural areas. And since we've had good broadband here, I think since 2009, I immediately said, okay, this is something that we definitely want to have in our application. So Kellen, thanks so much for joining me today. And you want to jump right in and let's talk about Fairfield and what makes it special.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for taking the time to talk about this. Micro businesses are certainly a passion of mine. I study everything about them. We survey their owners. We talk to various professionals at various different levels of government and economic development programs to help grow micro businesses, develop micro businesses, assist them, create new ones, whatever it may be. We often talk about internet, about broadband connection to the internet and access to the internet, especially in rural and remote areas, as being table stakes, right? So you have to have it. It's necessary, but it's not necessarily sufficient all on its own, right? It's necessary but not sufficient. And so there's something in Fairfield, something going on in Fairfield that's driving microbusiness development, both in terms of the overall presence and count of them, but also in terms of their activity level as well. And so the numbers that I have reflect both of those things. So the higher presence of micro businesses relative to other counties, both nationwide and counties of similar size, as well as the activity levels of those micro businesses. So we'll kind of skip some of the generic stuff here up front. I'll breeze through some of the early stuff here that talk about micro businesses generally. But we know, generally speaking, micro businesses have big impacts on the communities where they are. They drive up median household income. They drive down unemployment. They create jobs, right? They're good things for the community. But oftentimes when we talk about micro businesses with community leaders, we get the question, well, how do I get more of them, right? And that's something unique in Fairfield, I think, that's going on that Fairfield has that other communities don't. There's something there driving new micro business development. But some of the other things that we've learned about micro businesses, just generic again, is nationwide, 60% are solopreneurs. They don't have any employees. 25% of them generate more than $4,000 in revenue a month. And 40% of them are run for supplemental income. So there's some sort of side hustle, so to speak. 31% of these have started in 2020 or later, and 60% are started by women, which is up from 49% prior to 2020, so in 2019 and earlier. Most of these are people who left jobs or started this micro business on the side while they were working somewhere else. And so, like I said, I'm not going to go through all the numbers here, but that's just kind of a generic profile of what a micro business is when I use that term. They usually require a little bit small amount of access to capital here, right? Under $5,000, generally speaking, 55% of them. And those who needed less, only 25% said they found it difficult to raise that money. So they're using less amount of money than you usually would have expected prior to, say, the explosion of e-commerce and the explosion of the internet in terms of use by businesses. So jumping up to the Fairfield and specific numbers, right? We can go through all sorts of survey data if you'd like, but jumping up to Fairfield and really I pulled Jefferson County here just so you can get a view of the area. Before I jump into those, actually, I'd like to take a second to define one of the terms. So I'm going to talk about the MAI index value, which is the blue number there at the top row that's kind of called out. The MAI is the Micro Business Activity Index, and it's a composite score that we assign where 100 is the average county in 2020, April of 2020. So basically, at the start of the pandemic, where did the average county sit? An average county was at 100 in terms of microbusiness activity. Now, the score is derived from 3 different sub-indices. One taps into infrastructure, so how wired and ready is a community to support microbusinesses. This is broadband subscription access. This is human capital. This is some other things that go into that. Participation describes the number of microbusinesses and their entrepreneurs that own them and the growth rates of those numbers. And then the engagement subindex has 7 different component variables that tap into things like economic footprint, traffic on the website, those different things that'll tell you a bit more about how active a website is, how often it's content, what we call at GoDaddy the heartbeat score, how frequently the content on the website's updated. So that's what an MAI score is tapping into. So you can see for MAI, this metric that's tapping into activity, a score of 100 is average. They're at 107.4. The county national average in Q4 2020 was 102.1, whereas small population counties where they had less than 50,000 people, the average score was 100.9. So you're really looking at something unique going on in Jefferson County. It's kind of an abstract number here, and I won't waste time jumping into the methodology of all of those things unless you really want me to. But yeah, generally speaking, the activity index in Jefferson County is much higher. The 3 component subindices are broken down there for you below. You can see Jefferson County outperforms greatly in terms of infrastructure, a very well-wired community with a lot of human capital. Part of that is education rates. Participation is high, so you have a ton of microbusinesses in Jefferson County. Surprisingly, though, you see engagement at 91.3. So below 100 means below average. And that's actually a place where Jefferson County could be doing better. So this is a place where there's also actually, I should pause there because there's 2 things that could be going on. One is one of the metrics in engagement is age of business. So if you had a ton of new entrepreneurs starting new businesses and new websites that are only mere weeks or months old, that would drive your score down somewhat, you might say unfairly, because you have a hub of entrepreneurial activity kind of holding you back. Needless to say, that's almost, you can think of it as a conservative bias in your score, right? Despite having that thing going on. Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing to take into consideration, although it is only one of 7 things, right? So it only has so much weight. But there are other pieces there that are related or correlated, right? If you're a young page, you also probably have little traffic, right? You probably also have little economic footprint, so on and so forth. So that being said, that's one place for, I guess you could say, one place for opportunity. That microbusiness density score, though, that reflects that higher participation score. 48.4 says there's 50 businesses for every 100 people in Jefferson County. So
Yes.
yeah, that's wild. A lot of them, a lot of businesses, a lot of micro businesses. And then you see we construct our density figures there based on the adult population, 18 and over. So we put those numbers there for you as well. So you just have reference points. But yeah, nationwide, all counties, all 3,200 or so counties nationwide, you can see the averages there. Jefferson County far outperforms on everything other than that engagement piece. The average population, adult population, is 79,000 in those counties nationwide. But if you just limit it to counties under 50,000, you can see the adult population is right in line with the average 50,000 person county.
And what does the 486 versus the 754, apples to apples with the adult population, what do you make of that?
Yeah, that is a raw count, right? So that's really what the difference that's driving all of this is. On average, you have about 500 micro businesses in a small population county. But in Jefferson County, you have more than 7,000. That's crazy. What's the math on that? I'd say that explains a lot of what's going on in Jefferson County. So in terms of the culture or environment that's being created in Jefferson County, that's a bit more of an esoteric or kind of meta conversation that I can't really dive into with the numbers here. But you can sort of, what I grabbed on the left are zip codes in Jefferson County. So that's why it's not shaped just like Jefferson County, because some of the zips will be outside Jefferson County, so on and so forth. But yeah, you can see the dark places are where the hefty concentration is. And you can see right in the middle, that's in the Fairfield zip code. Yeah. So yeah, this is just doing a visual comparison kind of throughout 2021, what that MAI score looked like compared to the national average, both in terms of the composite and the sub indices. So you can see like engagement was a strong point for Fairfield, and it kind of dropped recently. So that tells me there's been a surge in new businesses in Fairfield recently. And the 89.4 is where it was. You can see it's up to 91.3 now. So coming back up after a surge of new businesses. But that you can see here is a kind of visual depiction of where it is. And overall composite ended 2021 at 104.4. We're ending 2022 at 107.4. So that's a jump up as well. That's a good thing to see for Jefferson County. And actually there you can see I've listed out the various components that go into the engagement score for you. But some of these trend lines are, I mean, Fairfield and Jefferson County is just so far off the charts that makes the comparison almost kind of ridiculous. Usually when I plot these, the national trend line is somewhere around the county I'm plotting, and so there looks to be more variation in the graph than we see here. But yeah, the density figure of Jefferson County is just so off the charts, it makes it kind of a laughable comparison.
Yeah, so I missed that actually because I was looking at the top two lines and
Yeah,
didn't realize that there's that bottom line, which is very fascinating because it's pretty flat, right?
yeah, it's an ever so slightly upward trending line. So your dotted line or dashed line is just the trend line for that series. So you can see Jefferson County is trending upwards over time. And it's hard to tell down here, but yeah, because this number is so big, it makes this number and the variation in that number so small and ridiculous. Yeah, but it does have about a 2.7% annual growth rate over time. That blue line at the bottom.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's, and this is just source data feeding into this with some notes and whatnot. So that's kind of the end of the deck there.
This is so amazing. So a question I'm going to ask is, okay, there's obviously a lot of activity. What does this mean in terms of, you said you had data on the transactions and that kind of thing. Do you have anything that you're willing to talk about with that?
Yeah, I do. I have a white paper we're about to publish. So now we've got a white paper coming out at GoDaddy. On the Venture Forward team does, and we took a look at what we are calling hardened and resilient cities, or those cities that were most well positioned to bounce back or at least absorb the impact of economic upheaval such as COVID-19, right? The shutdowns that we dealt with, the work from home situations a lot of us transitioned to, and some of us never left. And all of the different things that were associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, we went and looked at, okay, what are some of the cities that were able to weather the storm, so to speak? And what were some of the cities that were really hardest hit by those impacts? And what can we learn from those cities? And so we took Fairfield as an example, primarily because of the off the chart microbusiness density numbers, and said, what's going on in Fairfield? So we took a look and basically dug up what you're looking at here. We have monthly industry mix. Now you have to keep in mind the industry and commerce data I'm about to share with you, and that underlie the resiliency score that we've attached to Fairfield here. These are monthly industry and commerce data, and so they reflect monthly microbusiness activity. So that means industry is going to shift a lot. So you have some industries where you have sales, transactions, orders, bookings, those sorts of things, appointments. You have money changing hand constantly throughout the month. You have other industries where they might do 2 sales a month, or they might do 4 sales a year, right? And they might not show up on one month, but in another month, they're at the top of the list. So you have a lot of that kind of volatility and variation. That is kind of an asterisk attached to all of this. But the industry and commerce data I'm going to share with you here is actually a newer data product at the Venture Forward team that we just released a few months ago. So we were kind of diving into it in this white paper to see what we could learn from it. And so here we can see last summer is when we were taking our first look at this. The microbusiness industry mix, entertainment and restaurants were the top 2 industries last summer in Fairfield online. Like, you just have some population numbers here. Your average microbusiness lifespan was about 12 months. This is going to reflect a lot of that, new entrepreneurship going on in the area. But you can also see some of the different things going on over time. And again, this is last summer, so these numbers up here are going to be a lot different from what we were just looking at. But the numbers that are most important here are the GMV and orders ranking. So compared to 315 similar cities, in terms of GMV rank, and this is ordered per capita. It's in the top third. So of similar size city, Fairfield GMV is gross merchandise value. So this is the actual dollars that are changing hands, is in the top third, which is impressive considering Fairfield's population size. Orders similar, 145 out of 315, whatever I didn't do the math for you here. So in terms of percentiles, what that math comes down to. And it's additionally impressive because of the merchants rank being a smaller number, right? So there are fewer merchants driving more dollars, is basically what's going on in terms of the per capita rankings here.
And Colin, what are the comparison cities? Is that all cities or just micropolitans?
These are going to be micropolitans. Yeah, you have to have 10,000, I think, to be in there. Yeah, in the metro area in Fairfield, they consider 18,000 is like where it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it includes in the metro area, like Batavia is in there.
Right. All of it.
Yeah. So yeah, these are kind of the industry and commerce numbers we pulled out. We have these all on our website. Like if you went to the Venture Forward website, there's a profile for Fairfield that we update each month. So it's updated for every city each month. We have just a dynamic site that'll pull the latest for you. So these are the ones from last summer that we're kind of calling out in this white paper, but it was interesting to see them, right? Considering Fairfield's size, where they are in terms
unemployment
of
looks pretty interesting in terms of 2.5 versus 3.6.
Yep. For sure. Yeah. Fairfield's economic powerhouse.
And so tell me what the 2.02, because we saw the raw data on the MESI, but the 2.02, how good is that?
Yeah. So this is taking the share of the way that, I guess the easiest way to explain it, the share of digital micro businesses relative to the share of the overall economic wealth of the country. So given how much, like the proportion of GDP that a county is generating relative to the rest of the GDP of the country, we would expect, some similar size proportion of micro businesses relative to the overall number of micro businesses across the country. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's expressing the ratio between those two things. So basically, the MESI score says more the economy more the share, that difference in the share is explained by micro businesses relative to some other source, whatever it may be.
Okay, so if micro businesses and all businesses are the same, that score would be 1.
No, so it's saying it's the proportion of over. Yeah, it's kind of a without diving into the white paper and reading you exactly. It's the proportion of the total number of micro businesses in the country that are in Fairfield divided by the proportion of the total GDP of the country that is divided by the Fairfield GDP. Yeah, if that makes sense. Yep. So what it's saying is we would expect that number to be 1 in a situation where
I thought,
you would expect it to be 1. So in a situation where it's 2, it's saying that you have twice as many micro businesses as you would expect, given your share of GDP. There's one way to think of it.
Great. Terrific. So, Kellen, I found, and this white paper is not yet published, but of course we will be looking forward to the publication of it.
Yeah.
But going down to the comparison cities, I found that really fascinating to just look at some of the comparison cities and what's happening with their MESI score and that kind of thing. So maybe we just kind of flip through those and just kind of see what we see.
Yeah. I'll give you a quick run through here. Some of the ones we pulled out. Kalispell, Montana metro area is a bit bigger than Fairfield. Their businesses are a little tiny bit older, but a much bigger in terms of their ranking to their peer group. So they're in the metropolitan category, but we skim out the top essentially 250K plus the big mega metros and give them their own categories. So this is the group between micros and top metros, if you want to think about it that way. And they're a powerhouse there, Kalispell. So we go through and talk about some of the different projects that are going on in these areas, the different programs and programming that they have available, and some of the key highlights for what's going on and what those leaders are doing in that area. Now, here's a situation, though, where the MESI score is 0.5. So that's saying, given their share, we would expect more micro businesses than they have. So their micro businesses aren't driving as much of their economy as well, hypothetically, based on the MESI score. we
Right.
would expect that their economy isn't being driven nearly as much by microbusinesses as it is in Fairfield. Yeah. And then another one that we called out, and this is in the top 100 metro category, one of the big metro areas. This is Palm Bay metro area. It includes Palm Bay, Melbourne, Titusville, Florida. So that, I think that's the East Coast, Space Coast area over there. Yeah, again, messy is lower. So it's one of those scenarios where their share of the economy, you would expect more microbusinesses than they have. Just some of those cities are the hardened and resilient. Now these three, the at risk and vulnerable, are those where we've gone negative. So we're in a scenario where there's a tiny proportion of their economy that are made up of microbusinesses, and so our theory here is, therefore, more of your business relies on in-person brick and mortar transactions, face-to-face sort of business models.
Mm-hmm.
And in those situations, you have greater impacts from something like COVID-19, where brick and mortar businesses are hit harder. So
I see a 7.9% unemployment versus 3.6.
Right. And we can see a lot of that reflected in the stats that we pull. Yeah, in here. So that's one of these is Laurinburg, North Carolina. It's a coastal city, 35,000. So this is a small category. Wheeling, West Virginia is the mid category example we pulled out. Negative 1.63. And then McAllen, Texas is the big metro one. 8.1% unemployment at the literally bottom of the pack of the big metro areas.
Yeah. Well, terrific.
And this, I think, some of the things we called out here were scenarios where these economies were heavily invested in one. What's the term? There wasn't industry diversification, so to speak, in terms of workforce. So if you had one industry or a handful of industries that really took a hit, and you had a couple of those that are dominating your economy, that was a story. Especially, I think, in Wheeling. Wheeling had a big problem with that. Yeah. So I don't know. Is there something else you want me to dive into here?
No, I think maybe we can just come back to full screen and just wrap it up.
Okay.
So, Kellen, thank you. That was a whirlwind tour, and I really will look forward to that white paper becoming available. So for our economic developers, for people in Fairfield who are wondering, okay, how real is this thing? Are we famous for being famous, or do we really have something going on? Let's just summarize kind of the key takeaways.
Yeah, key takeaway. Fairfield's clearly a bed of entrepreneurship. There's a lot going on. One of the first things when you started business in 2023, and really I think this is maybe not new, but more prominent now in the post-COVID world we're all in. One of the first things you do when you start a business is start a website, get an online presence, maybe some social media marketing. You might start a Facebook page, depending on what you're selling or what you're offering. If you're a service or a product provider, you might have some sort of online store you want to get up and running, or some storefront you want to establish. And when it comes down to it, we see in our surveys of our customer base and our surveys of the market more broadly that to be the case, that people just start websites. It's one of the first things they do. So in that context, these microbusiness numbers just show that you have a ton of entrepreneurship going on in Fairfield. And not only that, but they're sticking around. They're surviving. They're contributing to their economy, the local economy. And we see it. We can see it clearly through the venture forward data.
Willem, thank you very much. This is really fascinating. This will not be the last conversation we have for sure, but it is certainly a fascinating one.
Thank you.